What was the very first convention you ran a game at, and what do you remember about it?
Well, my first game convention ever was Gen Con 1980. No, actually, no, that was the first big one. The first ever game convention was in Morgantown, West Virginia. Um, and I was part of a TSR crew that got sent to support the con and promote D&D. They had constructed a tournament. The guy actually who had written uh, the Gen Con AD&D Open tournaments, Bob Blake, was coming in from Indiana. And so I got a chance to meet everybody. Jim Ward was on that trip as well as Tom Long. And as to what exact games I ran, I don't recall. It was whatever I was assigned, and I was running, I'm sure, a round or three of the tournament that they had written and provided. I was still a rookie. Um, and I wasn't running any of my own stuff, basically. So my memories of that are very hazy. And that was an ill-fated trip since we had gone there in a, TSR Chevy Suburban, which proceeded to break down in West Virginia. And they were in a quandary as to what to do with all those TSR people, some of whom were on staff, including me, and getting paid for sitting there waiting for the thing to get fixed. They ended up bringing us back by train, giving up on this poor old vehicle, and driving us back to Lake Geneva from Chicago. Um, the first convention I recall clearly, though, was in, as I say, Gen Con 1980, at which I helped run once again the AD&D Open and other games. Mostly assisted the Gen Con coordinator, though, at that time. So I got a firsthand view of the insider's look of from the top down, looking at the whole convention. Um, the game that I played at that convention nearly ruined me. All the TSR, a lot of the TSR staff got ping pong ball guns, little plastic guns that shoot the ping pong balls, and played a game of assassin. You're given a photo of your target and I think two or three ping pong balls along with the gun, and you don't know who's got who as a target. It's somebody else who's another TSR employee. This made everybody just hyper paranoid for the entire convention. You're walking around the con and looking around all the time. I killed a couple of people. One was a real close call. I got hit right after he got hit. So technically, by the rules, he was the one who was out. But then somebody got me fair and square on an escalator or stairway or something shortly after that. But then the game was done for me, and it was, oh, see, when you get killed, then you give the your assassin the photo that you're carrying. You can keep the gun if you like as a souvenir, which I did for a while.
Awesome. So, um, when you were running those games at conventions, like just so everybody understands what is the difference between a game at a convention and a game that somebody might be playing at their house.
Well, at home, of course, we know how that goes. You get together, you make up a character, you usually play it in some sort of a world or scenario that's provided by the game master. Now, the world and scenario and all that, the world has to be trimmed down quite a bit for a convention game, which generally occurs in, it is pretty much shaken out to a 4 hour slot. If you start games at 8 a.m., 4 hour slots finish you up at midnight, give everybody time to party a bit, get a 4 hour sleep, and go back into the grind once again. Um, but a convention game, given that 4 hour slot, most common, you need time to let people settle in and gather. Then they need to look at their characters, have the situation described to them, play out the whole game, wrap things up, do their award or voting or whatever is done at the end of the round of play, and then please clean up your areas for the next group, which is who is going to arrive in probably about 4 to 5 minutes, and want to do the whole thing their way. So a convention game has to be very compact and very fast moving. Um, in constructing convention games, and I have designed more than a dozen different scenarios for this, usually using D&D or advanced D&D rules across the board. I never ventured much into science fiction at the conventions or other genres, although I have done a boot hill or two. Um, but the system I developed was this: so that the characters back in 1980, 81, when I first started the RPGA, I introduced basically character summaries. It started as just simple one-liner, just one sentence describing your character in brief, something about personality or behavior or background or something. This grew then into a full paragraph as my time went on, but I never got larger than that. You don't have time to sit and read whole treatises while you're sitting there, especially with the 4 hour time crunch of the scenario. So, given the core objective, the most highest priority, to be able to understand the character, digest a capsule summary of it within just a couple of minutes tops, because everybody's going to be itching to get moving into the game. Um, the character background has since developed since I started it in 1981. It has evolved from a one sentence, just something to start your role playing ideas going, to full multi-page character backgrounds for characters. And these are given out with a straight face sometimes at conventions when people just don't have the time to read through all this, let alone integrate it into how they're going to play the character and try and remember all the little tidbits. You need just a few highlights, the points that you can get across through effective role playing without dominating the table while meshing with the activity that's going on. And of course, your group has an objective you're trying to reach. So um, that's the main thing. Easily digestible and very important when I designed it, well balanced parties and characters. Some people would be so compulsive, let's just say, as to compare the statistics on the characters, who's got a better strength, who's got a better charisma, and they would end up finding out if any one character was lagging behind the others in any of these point scores and things like that as part of this basic competitive nature of the players and people. So I always made sure that every character had the exact same total when you added up all the statistics, strength, intelligence, charisma, all that. So that took care of a lot of arguments and things in play. Another big no-no in convention play is inserting a character that is so unusual or so dominant that he or she dominates the action for the course of play. This includes, unfortunately, the paladin class of character who is by nature and by the book a dominant leader type and would thus be the one pretty much driving the whole adventure if you put one in a group of characters. A last comment on this, when designing the characters, I always designed the party first and then created an adventure. I'd have some cool idea for an adventure or a few possibilities floating around. But I would design the party, and as I say, make sure that they're all balanced, they're all playable, they all have good characteristics that can be played and brought out at the table quickly, without a lot of in-depth examination or things like that. And so each player at the table has an equal opportunity to make their character, make their point, show how they are at role playing, how they are at cooperating with other players, turning over situations to others to see how they do. Here, give me your best shot. Show me what you can do for role playing. So designing for all that to encourage all these, what I feel are good play traits, good characteristics of play at the table become crucial with this short time span you have, limited by that, generally, as I say, the 4 hour scenario. So that's convention games, really, in a nutshell. In the course over the years, I've come up with a few twists on the general standard convention games because part of my nature is I hate doing the same thing everybody else is doing. I always look for something new. Somebody dared me to come up with an all new type of dungeon adventure once, and I came up with an old abandoned well that you had to climb down in, and then an icy cavern down below that the old former source of ice had turned into, and it turned out to be ice-based monsters down in there that had arrived. But just getting down the well and into the place was a whole new challenge for some people. One very unusual one that I came up with early on back in 82 or 3 was a design your own adventure. Oh yeah, you want what do you want? You want a low level or mid level or high level? You want epic stuff? You want a mystery, puzzle solving, or what? So I'll tell you what, each of you as players, we have six players here, let's say, each of you write down a person of any sort, a an object, magical would be a good idea, and a place. Now, the person and the place can be anywhere in history, mythology, reality, whatever you like, from fiction. And write down your name on this sheet of paper, small scrap of paper, along with this person, object, and place. Pass them all over to me. Give me 10 minutes, and I will construct an entire logical adventure utilizing every one of those 18 pieces and put the puzzle together into a sometimes a rather oddball adventure. It has to be strained a little bit to accommodate all the different parts. But as each person, place, or thing shows up, I call on the culprit. Okay, whose fault was that after we work through this horrible forest or deal with a beholder or monster or whatever things happen? So this was a something really new for convention games, and several of my friends picked up on it and changed it to their way. Tim Kask has a variety that he runs to this day. Jim Ward had his version, and a variety of other people too. So that caught on fairly well. So that's my convention games really in a nutshell. I've written more than a dozen scenarios for the RPGA, generally involving low to mid level play, not getting into high level. High level characters get so complex, it's very hard once again to fit into a 4 hour slot. If you make arrangements for a double or a 8 hour slot and take a break in the middle or something, yes, you can try high level characters in a real epic, long ranging adventure, and I've done that a few times too.
So, so you know, you've been doing this for now, what, 3 or 4 decades, and you like
Mhm.
the new. So you're always constantly trying to evolve and better understand what people want now, right?
Right.
So how have player expectations shifted from the 70s, 80s, 90s into the now?
Well, player expectations are often for a something new. They want something new to happen in the game. Speaking of a convention game, once again. Um, that being the case, they don't usually go in with a lot of preconceptions as to what they want. Um, Hence, my what I deduced was a logical and appealing path to come up with something, an all new experience for them for each adventure, really.
I'm here. I'm just trying to get my camera set back up. It
Okay.
overheated. Okay. So we're still going on with the convention stuff. As soon as I can get this back going. Let's see here.
We're still rolling. So, one of the more notorious convention experiments that I tried was a 6 part adventure. Each part, all six, being a 4 hour session at a convention. We tried this at 2 consecutive Gen Cons, one at Gen Con East um, in, I believe, Widener College in Chester, Pennsylvania. And then that same year at Gen Con in, I believe it was the University of Parkside, although it may have been Milwaukee at that point. And to find a topic suitable for 6 rounds of tournament, and with the high expectations, grandiose expectation that people would enjoy it so much at the one convention, they would make plans to come to the other convention hundreds of miles away to finish the whole story. But at least half a dozen or more of them did so. So it worked to some extent. But the topic I chose was the legendary Rod of Seven Parts. Now, this was later written up by the outstanding author Skip Williams as a second edition adventure product, which was sold. Bears no relation to the one that I wrote. In mine, I took a very Tolkien quirk and had a group of dwarves abduct a human mage because dwarves don't cast mage type spells. They did have their own cleric, and they did have their own thief. They didn't need a hobbit, but they did need a mage. So they kidnapped him basically by magic. They hit him with a quest spell by surprise, which causes him to wither up and die unless he does what the quest is. And the quest is retrieving the infamous Rod of Seven Parts. And they have one part to start with, which points at the next one. So that gives the party a clear way to avoid dithering. They know which way to go, what they're looking for, and they have all the assets they need. So they proceed through 6 rounds of tournaments, collecting parts of this to a massive finale at the end at Gen Con. Nobody else had ever tried this before or since. It's one of a kind, the 6 part dungeon adventure. Not actually, only 2 parts of the whole thing are dungeons. The rest are outdoor and wilderness and that sort of thing. And it ends up on the elemental plane of air, dealing with the genies. Wild and crazy times at the tournament adventures, the like of which you probably never see in your home games.
So when you were building these stories, were there any specific mechanics that you were trying to test to see if you could break games, or if or that didn't work, or that worked so exceptionally well that you ended up putting it in other things that you were doing later?
Interesting question. Um, One thing I found that did break the, so to speak, the tournament game would be to start a mystery or something that requires a slow, deliberate process. At a convention game, people need excitement, action, adventure. They're there for things to happen. They're there to interact. They are not there to slog their way through a long story concocted by a game master that hopefully you will appreciate its glory and complexity and devious detail at the end of it. No, 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 that doesn't really work in a convention game. So one technique I developed was that when you start you've gathered your parties all together, you've interacted a little, you know who's who, what your objective is, and you start to head out. Well, I tend to hit you with something that you've got to resolve immediately. Generally, a minor battle. Nobody's going to die. It's going to go fairly easily. It'll more be a test of how few resources you can manage to use to overcome this minor obstacle near the beginning. Well, what it does at the table is that it wakes everybody up, get some dice rolling, get somebody into the action, and all of a sudden things are going and they're into the game, and then you can continue from there quite easily. As a technique, it works. I've found extremely well in convention games. Wake them up.
So when you were running games for TSR, did they have internal guidelines for how you ran adventures publicly?
There were a few guidelines, unofficial really, on what not to do in games. Avoiding, for example, politics, vulgarity, and obscenity, the usual sort of thing. Just keep it all G-rated. Um, Other than that, one technique at conventions that I strongly advocated. I wouldn't say that I started it, but I was certainly a driving force there in the early 80s, 80 through 83, at TSR. At conventions, I want people to be sure to adhere absolutely precisely to the advanced D&D rules by the book. No variations, no home rules, this and that at the tables, because this then set the standard and told the world by example that the AD&D rules are ideal for tournament and convention use because they provide a rock solid baseline that does not vary. And you can make a lot of in-game deductions based on those by the book rules. When you get into variations and so forth, first you got to instruct everybody on what those are. And then you have to deal with very often complexities and variations that occur because of that change during the game. And you're basically not playing by the book AD&D. And it's just easier for everybody at conventions, especially in tournaments, but overall in general, to do that. The other ulterior motive was that by showing straight by the book AD&D across the board by all the employees running games of all sorts, we demonstrated that these games themselves were rock solid. You did not have to mess with them and change them. You could play them straight out of the book, out of the box or out of the book, and they work perfectly well. And look, see what we're doing with them here, and we're not messing with them either. So it helped reinforce the stability and the flexibility of the game systems as published, as well as promoting additional sales for the company. Just of course, there's always that aspect.
No, that's fair. So like you said, the mechanics of particularly AD&D were rock solid. So, but was there ever a time that you were at a table and you were in a game where you took the feedback from a player that ultimately made it back into the game as it moved forward? If there was, what was that feedback?
Really can't think of anything like that. Sorry.
That's fair. Let's see.
Oh
Now,
well.
now you did say that there's less of focus on story as there is on getting things moving. I guess with gameplay. But when you included story, how did you include that during gameplay to keep it going?
Well, I would beg to differ that the story is downplayed because story, you get the action going with a little minor combat in the beginning, but story is what gets them out the door in the first place and gets them to continue from there. And it is a compelling story that provides the motivation generally for getting through the whole adventure, getting to the finale, and making it a complete story, not just part of one.
No, that's a great answer. Um,
One of the most common errors I've seen by game masters at conventions. Let's say I give them this scenario, and we know you have a 4 hour time slot. You want to finish this segment of the adventure during that time. One thing that we should have given people more of at the time, we just didn't know, was instruction and training in how to cut encounters. As you're running through the adventure, you keeping an eye on the clock, you get a pretty good idea by halfway through at worst whether the party is going to make it to the final point of this segment of the adventure, the finale for that tournament round. And if it looks like they're proceeding too slowly, they're missing too many clues, I found it. Unfortunately, I discovered this actually years later. It is very important to cut or summarize lead-in encounters, things that are less critical, less important, especially those involving long drawn-out combats that the party's probably going to win anyway. And for the sake of story, you can summarize that and a lot, just arbitrarily, damage taken by this, that, and everybody in the process, but saving the players, the people at the table, a half an hour to 45 minutes of playtime, thus enabling you to get to more story oriented episodes following said combat. Um, And it doesn't have to be a combat that you're skipping, that's just an example. But by getting to the finale and allowing the players and the characters to all complete that segment, that phase of the adventure, and sometimes the whole adventure, it's finishing up at that point. It is so much more satisfying to the convention goer who has paid money for a seat at this table for this time, and so unsatisfying I found to make it most of the way through and fall short. If we only had another 2 hours or whatever. No, and I discovered there are actions a good game master, proficient in convention games, actions that that person can take to cut, just cut entirely, peripheral, irrelevant encounters, little scenes along the way, based on your judgment as to whether the party's going to make it to the finale, assuming that making it to the finale is an overriding goal. For which you will sacrifice almost everything else except crucial plot points along the way. You want to keep in a fair mix of combat, role playing, story, and time for the characters to interact, the players to interact. These are all very fun parts of the game that you don't want to skip over for the sake of some designer's idea of an epic story and how it must proceed and how it should end. You can skip over that how it must proceed part very often, skip over chapters or summarize them, like I say, and it makes for a magnificent convention game when you do that. You finish up, you have your finale, and everybody's just gloriously happy as they head off to lunch or their next event.
And I've seen that a few times, done very well. Like you're saying, at a convention where you do have to hit that time limit, and so you have to
Mhm.
be able to match the pace of the clock. And
It
so,
takes some skill and experience to do that, to know what to cut and when. I have seen outstanding game masters start cutting as early as 1 hour into a 4 hour session just because they had an idea of their abilities, their pacing that they wanted to achieve, and which of the given encounters were effectively just obstacles to that instead of contributing points along the storyline.
absolutely. So I'm going to move into a little bit about the culture of conventions and how that affected TSR's success. And so, from your standpoint, how important were conventions to TSR's relationship with the fans and ultimately that relationship that led to their success?
Well, just look back to the earliest wargaming conventions and the simple fact that in one issue of Alarms and Excursions, Lee Gold's fanzine, which unfortunately is now wrapping up after all these decades, I just heard. More power to her. Just a monument amongst the history of the hobby. But in a letter to Alarms and Excursions, Gary Gygax was explaining the origins of D&D and how it all started. And he explained how he and Dave Arneson were playing a game at a convention. And Dave was explaining and demonstrating this Bronstein idea that Dave Wesley, another wargamer friend, had run for him. That instead of running units of war troops, you were running war type individuals, and on a mission, sort of a top secret or get smart style mission to penetrate this castle Braunstein and achieve certain objectives. And Gary was fascinated by this individual objective and so forth, the breaking down of a war game from the mass version right down to the individual personal level. And this is what then, through their interaction, developed and became the first Dungeons and Dragons, the birth of roleplay. Um, Convention games in Southern Illinois, in California, and on the East Coast were absolutely crucial to the early spread of Dungeons and Dragons. Game stores like the Complete Strategist, with stores in both New York and Greater Philadelphia, many others here and there. Real hotbed down in, I mentioned Southern Illinois University, where Tim Kask and others were discovering this at the earliest time And Tim ended up moving just a few miles north up to Lake Geneva and joined them in starting TSR in the first place. Um, at conventions, conventions were so important that I managed to talk Gary as late as 1980, 81 into coming along with us down to smaller local conventions such as Evansville, Indiana, one in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, various less than 300 people generally, and getting out there because other people were discovering these conventions, were showing up, and they were in the process discovering the latest new games. They were plugging into the network as it was growing of hobby games. What had started just pure war games and then got into card games a little bit, but more common card games. We didn't have things like Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh at that point, decades ahead. Um, but playing these war games and some of them science fiction game board games, and then role playing arrived on the scene. So there was plenty to do, plenty of variety, both historical, mythological, science fiction. Um, and it went from there. People started, this built the hobby itself, the interaction of people around this core interest. And as a hobby, then it grew like wildfire. A similar phenomenon actually popped up back in the before World War II with the spread of a game, a very intellectual card game called Bridge, where basically for four people around a table, and you decide you play as partners and decide who can take how many tricks using one suit of the four as the trump that'll take anything. And this evolved into a whole elaborate culture of a hobby, and bridge clubs still exist all over the world. I happen to play bridge. I've been guilty of playing penny a point bridge in college and beyond. But this is an example of how get-togethers, in that case, bridge tournaments, and then evolving into broader card conventions featuring bridge tournaments, and then war game conventions featuring this new role playing stuff, and then war game and role playing conventions featuring this new card game stuff in the 90s when Magic came out. So it all of which is to reinforce the crucial need for word of mouth and the role of game conventions in spreading that word of mouth. Now, the crucial difference between then and now, of course, is that during the 90s, the internet got big. I was doing internet. I did an interview on CompuServe in 1986 before I left TSR. Yes, kids, the internet goes back that long. And so I've been online since 87 or so, and regularly since 1990 or 91. And the internet very well may have supplanted our need for in-person interaction at game conventions vis-a-vis the promotion of new games. We certainly see plenty of advertising on the internet, Facebook or whatever, for the new games. Even when I pull up my general Google feed, just the settings on it give me the latest game news, what's been going on in computer games and hobby games and various things. So it's delightful that you can keep track of everything. I do wonder whether it already has decreased the amount of interpersonal interaction that we've had. And I do hope that we can keep up the face-to-face stuff, not just meeting in a D20 room or something like that, not virtual meeting, but actual face-to-face meeting, and keep up that skill set of human interaction. It's all so easy to get drawn away from that these days. So please try to keep that up by getting together in person at game conventions and keep the traditions and the fun going that way.
So, do you miss anything about the older, more grassroots era of conventions when they weren't as kind of large and spectacles as they kind of become?
Well, your presumption is that they have become this, and they only applies to a very few. You have Gen Con and Origins in this country, and of course the mega Comic Cons and things like that. But other than that, there is still a thriving group of coast to coast of conventions of less than 500 people that have not gone for the cosmic spectacle direction of the big guys. And those are the ones I prefer. You have time to meet people, to game with people, to get to know people. And it's lots of fun walking around a dragon's hoard and looking at what's there in the dealer rooms at these mega conventions. And if you have enough money, you can certainly indulge yourself. But once again, this caters to those who have the money. And a 4 day at Gen Con plus a trip to the dealer room between food and lodging and convention costs and all that can easily run you a couple of $1,000s. So, by contrast, small convention I used to go to a lot over in Iowa before I got sick. I used to go there and game with the late Kim Eastland, the RPGA coordinator after me. Um, but that would draw less than 200 people generally. I was even a judge at the costume contest and filled in various things, but where you can just relax and have fun and enjoy the old ways. So they're still out there. You just got to look around.
So I'm gonna finish up with this question, which is if you had any advice for DMs who are wanting to run games at conventions, would that advice be to them to get started?
Well, if you want to run a convention game, my first tip is don't go it on your own if there are people looking for game masters. There are very often people who are running mini tournaments, things like that. So if you plug into the network around the convention, their website and whatever, or possibly other websites, find out who's running multiple games of the same type or similar types, who needs game masters, and it fits in with your interests. Try doing that because that will give you an intro to convention life, to convention gaming without having to do all the prep yourself. They'll have all the materials that you'll need to run. They'll give you all the tips you want, I hope. I would hope. If they want you to be their game master, they better give you some tips and instruction on what they want of you and what you should be doing. When you're ready to tackle it on your own, number one is being sure you have all your supplies. I generally survive on just a briefcase, but then I don't need any rule books, for one thing. I generally skip miniature figures, and I can get by on one small bag of dice. So all I need other than that is pencil and paper, some graph paper, as well as regular paper. I usually bring a few file cards because if you take a one of the larger ones, 4x6 file card or a 3x5, and you fold it in half, it makes a little tent you can stand in front of yourself as a player. And if you write the player's real name, how you prefer to be addressed during this game session, and then the character name, and then in brief, a what's visually obvious, Elven Ranger or human cleric, things like that. But you can put that on this little file card on the side showing everybody, and it gives everybody a real easy reference for when while they're getting oriented. Oh, okay, your name was John, yeah, okay, and they get used to that. They'll pick that up quickly. And your character's name is Fizbin, okay, fine, and they internalize that when it's on the card. They have the reminder there, and it just helps the game run that much faster and easier. That's one major tip I would give any new game master. But first, try working within the system with somebody who already knows the ropes. And then when you're ready to try it on your own, be sure you imitate what you saw, a well-prepared scenario, balanced party. Try this minimalist approach, if you will, of having not much in the way of accessories, going more theater of the mind. However, if your event coordinator prefers a more elaborate setup with figures and things like that, well, go with that style for the moment. You can go with full theater of the mind if you like later on. I happen to go with theater of the mind. It's pretty challenging for some folks, but it's the way we started and the way a lot of people still appreciate running it. The number one pit that new game masters at conventions fall into is that you got to face it. Everybody thinks up cool stories, cool adventures. You want to run your cool story, your adventure for other people. It is very easy to get so wrapped up in your own ideas that you prioritize completing your story, completing your ideas, whatever, your internalization, unfortunately, may become a higher priority than the enjoyment of the players. And you need to break out of that shell and get your sensors out and modify your story as needed to accommodate the dislikes and the likes of the group of players that you're running for. Now, this is a very much a learned skill and very tricky. It is also agonizing because you're taking your baby that you created, this wonderful story, and proceeding to tear chunks out of it, rip its arm off, and replace it with this gadget. But you end up with something if you're replacing it with parts and ideas that the players themselves have gotten behind. Not just tossed out on a whim, but oh, that sounds cool. Hey, I'd like to do this. Make it part of the story, and you will find that your tolerance of ideas and your ability to absorb the ideas of others and integrate them into your unified story will make you that much of a better creator as well as a better game master.
I think that was the perfect answer to that question, Frank. Thank you so much again for joining me this week. You've gone through my list of now 40 questions that I've been monitoring while we've been talking.
All right.
So I thank you again for the time. Jamie, are you there?
Yep. Yeah, he's next room.
Cool.
So that went okay?
Yes, sir, it did. That was
Okay.
excellent.
Yeah, I hope we're getting some good footage out of all this.
I think we are. I'm putting together a couple of the channels that we're going to put out for what we're calling your podcast.
Mhm.
Jamie's got a couple of ideas for names. I'd like you to come up with some too. We have to check and see if like domain names and trademark availability on some of that stuff. But yeah, we're gonna get that rolling soon now that we've got a couple of these finished.
And
Um,
since we're doing this stuff regularly, we got to work up a better studio here.
yes, I'm going to be
This looks the visuals suck here. We got to spruce this up. We got lots of artwork floating around and various things, artifacts. So we got to basically build a studio since we're going to be doing this regular.
yeah.
Easy enough. There's not much here in this house, so it's easy enough to build a studio in one corner of the living room.
Yep. And we can do a lot of that with lights and a couple of probably objects that you already have there,
Mhm.
so it won't be that difficult to
Yeah, I
do.
got piles of objects floating around as well as D&D bedspread and other things. I mean, there's plenty of ways we can liven up the color and this and that.
Yep, we're gonna make it look great. All right, thanks so much, Frank. Jamie, thank you for
Yep,
getting on. I've got another show to go prepare for here in just another 30 minutes. So,
good enough.
you guys have a great day.
Later.